The NHL season is here. The march to a three-peat is on for the defending champs. The Rangers are looking to bounce back under new head coach, and the final season for an LA legend underway. All that and more on this edition of Locked On NHL Game Night.
When that final horn sounds, you know it's time for Locked On NHL Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before. Only on Locked On NHL Game Night. Your team every day.
Hey, hockey fans, welcome to Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your teams every day. Thanks for making Locked On NHL Game Night your place to get a recap of the night in the NHL during the regular season and the playoffs. We are available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com, and you can win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm Eddie Garcia, an LA Kings fan on the West Coast. He is Alex Wiederspiel, a New York Rangers fan on the East Coast. And together we are here to tell you all about the big goal saves, moments, and stories from the opening night in the NHL with an assist from our local experts. And Alex, first off, welcome to Locked On NHL Game Night. You're one of our new hosts. We had six teams opening up the NHL season. We're excited to have you here, and we're excited to have hockey to talk about.
I feel like we've been waiting for this. I know I've been waiting for this for months and months, and just excited we finally got it. And some pretty good games tonight. It wasn't the best opening night we've ever seen, but it's a long season. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes, and as a Kings fan and as a Rangers fan, we are telling ourselves that after the opening games. But we'll get to that in a minute, because we're going to start with the last team that was standing last season, and that is the two-time defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. They raised another banner. They celebrated last year's championship one more time before getting onto the business of trying to be the first team to three-peat since the New York Islanders in the early 80s. And Alex, the Cats are missing two huge pieces of their championship teams. Captain Alexander Barkov gone for at least the regular season. Maybe he comes back late in the playoffs if they make it a deep run, and Matthew Tkachuk out until maybe 2026. But they find a way to get the job done. A hard-fought 3-2 win over a scrappy Chicago Blackhawks team. We're going to give our thoughts on this game, of course, but let's check in first with our local expert on the winning side. That is the host of Locked On Florida Panthers. He is Armando Velez.
No Tkachuk, and the depth still came through for the Florida Panthers. What is up, guys? Armando Velez here from the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast here outside of Emirates Bank Arena as the Florida Panthers defeated the Chicago Blackhawks by a final score of 3-2 on opening night. The Panthers rose another Stanley Cup championship banner, and for the Panthers, the key was that winning the races to the puck, whether it was their forwards intercepting them right at the blue line in their D zone and then getting behind the Chicago defense to allow them to get their north-south game going, and when they shot the puck into the O zone, into the corners, the Panthers, for the most part, were the first players on the puck, and it resulted in one of the goals. The third and fourth line came through with a goal, and power play 2 also came through. Perfect on the penalty kill. Although the Panthers trailed early on, they still grinded this one out. We'll break all this down and more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
And once again, thanks to Armando Velez for that report. And if you want to get a complete report, of course, check out Locked On Florida Panthers. But Alex, your thoughts on what Armando had to say, and I thought he was right. I mean, we talked about the two big players, he even mentioned it as well, that are going to be out for a while for Florida. They're going to need some other guys to contribute. They had it in this opening night win against Chicago.
So far, so good, right? The experiment of Anton Lundell and Sam Bennett is your 1 and 2C, whichever way that's going to go for Florida over the course of this season. But I think the thing that does track is that I think the idea of sort of writing this team off just based on, yes, the injury issues are huge, and there is no one who can replace Alex Barkov. Those things are all true, but it's a little premature to write this team off this early. When you throw up this veteran Panthers team and this group that knows how to win and turn 50-50 pucks into 60-40 pucks, 70-30 pucks, like Armando was pointing out, against a very young Chicago defense. I mean, really one of the youngest teams in the NHL, but particularly on the blue line. They showed that in spades the entire night.
And secondary scoring, right? There's no Barkov, there's no Tkachuk in this game anyway. We didn't see Sam Bennett. Jesper Boquist gets the game-winning goal in the third period, and it was one of those ugly goals that turns out to be beautiful. Throw the puck on net. It goes off his body or stick. He's trying to bunt it in. It goes in. AJ Greer, a fourth liner, gets a goal as well. So the depth scoring, at least for opening night, was certainly there. They're going to need contributions from a lot of different guys as they go forward without those two big guns in it, or at least until Kachuk comes back as well. We didn't hear Brad Marchand's name, some of those bigger names. We do know Sergei Bobrovsky knows how to get it done in net. Not a ton of shots for him, but 18 saves on 19 shots. He was his usual solid self. I will say, though, we're going to get into Chicago in a second, but Florida is certainly going to get everyone's best shot as the two-time defending champs. And now that they were a bit wounded, I think teams are thinking, hey, this is our chance maybe to make up some ground on this team that's been the best team in the NHL over the last couple of seasons. So it's going to be tough. Certainly they're battle tested, but it's going to be a fight for the Cats, I think, here for a while.
No, I think that's spot on. I just don't think it's going to be from necessarily Chicago in this case, right? Like, and I am probably higher on the Blackhawks than I think most are, and certainly Vegas is not particularly high on the Blackhawks. But you look at that group of young forwards having to go against Sam Bennett, and that's who wound up getting deployed as the number one center essentially tonight. The Marchand Bennett Verhaeghe line goes for more than 14 minutes at 5-on-5 in this one. And sort of the irony of it is they actually got outscored, right? They got outscored 1-0, but if you look by every single other metric, they dominated the Blackhawks in this one.
But let's talk about the Blackhawks. As they were a scrappy group in this one. They were in the game pretty much throughout. Let's get the inside scoop from our local expert with the Chicago Blackhawks, and that is Jack Bushman.
By this young Blackhawks group still winds up leading to a 3-2 win for the Florida Panthers on opening night. However, considering just how different these two team situations are entering the new season, I think it was a pretty darn respectable fight from the Blackhawks, and they also got a couple of promising performances from a few key players, first of which being Frank Nazar with a 2-point showing, including the opening goal of the 25-26 season on a breakaway. Connor Bedard didn't wind up on the stat sheet, but definitely was noticeable and had several good opportunities to find the back of the net. And then Spencer Knight, the 24-year-old, in his homecoming in Sunrise, was the best player on the ice for the Blackhawks, making 34 saves to keep the team alive all throughout the game. And again, considering it was the banner-raising ceremony for Florida on home ice, they're the two-time champs. I don't know if you really could have asked for more out of this young and inexperienced Blackhawks group.
Look at Jack Bushman, by the way. He's making everybody look bad by putting up his nice graphics and everything there. But nice job by Jack. We appreciate the report. And he's right. And I thought, in particular, Spencer Knight, Florida Panther, not cast off, but he was traded away. The Blackhawks are hoping he's, the goalie of the future, and I guess current as well. But we did see some nice performances from some of the younger players. And look, it's professional sports. This is not high school. There's no moral victories. But at the same time, most people aren't expecting much out of Chicago. If they can play as hard as they did and be as competitive as they were in this game, then I think you can say we're starting to see some progress from this group.
The second period in particular, Eddie, I thought they were a lot better, and they came out firing in the second period. A couple of odd man rushes, converted on one of them to tie the game. Ultimately, they were ground to a pulp in the third period, and I think that's something you expect with a group that's that young against a championship team that has eyes, regardless of their health, on a third one. But I think if you look at that second period, you look at that team speed for Chicago, those are the things that you're going to look for later on in the season. There are going to be plenty of opponents they're going to face who are not the Florida Panthers. That's your blueprint right there. Speed, counterattack, and getting those odd man rushes like they did at the start of the second period.
Also, probably don't want to be outshot 37-19. Also, special teams in this one goes to Florida. They were 1 for 2 on the power play, and Chicago was 0 for 3. How about this for a stat here to wrap up the Florida Panthers? This is a Panthers team that obviously has been really good of late, but not a historically great franchise. Now 12-0-2 in home openers. So opening night is to the liking of the Florida Panthers. Jeff Blashill, a loser in his Chicago head coaching debut. We had a couple of new head coaches making the debuts with their new teams at Madison Square Garden. We will talk Rangers Penguins next on Locked On NHL Game Night. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs post your site at the top of their page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If you've been in a spot where you need to hire right away, the pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback, that's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up the hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. All right, time to get to our next game, and it may be a little bit painful for my co-host, but we did have a pair of head coaching debuts with their new teams in the Big Apple. Mike Sullivan, former head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, now coaching the New York Rangers, and a former Rangers assistant, Dan Muse, coaching his first game, not only with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but in the NHL at all. I had never been an NHL head coach to this point. The Penguins get the surprising 3-0 shutout win. Now, it wasn't as quite as it was 1-0 for most of the game. Pens had a couple of empty netters to seal it. We're certainly curious to hear what Alex has to say about this with his favorite team, but we start on the winning side and we check in with one of our hosts from Locked On Penguins. He is Hunter Hodes.
Hey guys, Hunter Hodes here with the Locked On Penguins podcast after the Penguins get a 3-0 shutout victory over the New York Rangers on opening night. Dan Muse gets his first win as Penguins head coach over former Penguins head coach Mike Sullivan, who is now the head coach of the New York Rangers. And I felt like this was such a professional performance from the Penguins. They gave the Rangers literally nothing in the offensive zone. The forecheck was giving the Rangers fits throughout. The Rangers could not break the puck out of their own zone to save their lives that entire game. Justin Brazeau, newly signed during the offseason, gets 2 goals. Blake Lizotte also gets a goal. And the way the Penguins defended the lead in that third period, it's the best I've seen them do it in a few years. It's only one game. I don't have high expectations for this team this season, but it was a really nice first win under new head coach Dan Muse. Penguins are back in action this Thursday, the home opener against the Islanders, before they play the Rangers again this Saturday, this time at PPG Paints Arena. For more on the Pittsburgh Penguins, you can check out the Locked On Penguins podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, and we thank Hunter Hodes for that report. I don't know too many people who would have thought the stars of this game would be Justin Brazeau and Artur Shilovs, but that was the case as Pittsburgh goes into MSG. I know, Alex, you know very well, a lot of excitement there for a new season with the Rangers, but let's focus on the Penguins first off. He mentioned Justin Brazeau with 2 goals, and Artur Shilovs, who's a cast-off from the Vancouver Canucks, gets the start over Tristan Jarry, the name that most hockey fans are probably familiar with when it comes to Pittsburgh. And he gets his first career regular season shutout, 25 shots, 25 saves. So certainly a great start for Dan Muse and a surprising win for Pittsburgh.
Surprising, but I also think, there's an element of this where Dan Muse did just come from that bench, and there wasn't, a lot of the turnover that occurred last year happened during the season. So Muse was actually there for it. So he still coached a lot of the newer players as well. Yeah, maybe not Vladislav Gavrikov and Taylor Radish, but Muse was just there. So I think there's an element of that that's kind of unheralded. And then, kudos to Artur Shilovs, because this was a huge season for him. This is going to be a huge season for him, and he gets off on the right foot because he has to prove that he's an NHL goaltender and that his little playoff run with the Vancouver Canucks when Thatcher Demko was hurt, that wasn't a fluke. And this is his chance to do it. Gets off to a great start, especially with a Pittsburgh team that doesn't seem like it's going to be great, but defended very well in their first game.
By the way, no points for Sidney Crosby in this opener, if you were curious. Let's check in with our local expert on the losing side. That would be the host of the New York Rangers, Locked On New York Rangers, and that is John Chick.
So this offseason, there was quite a bit of swearing coming from the New York Ranger locker room. And what I mean by that is this team adopted a couple of new slogans, mantras, whatever you want to call them. But a couple of players, quite a few in fact, were wearing t-shirts during the preseason that said no BS. A couple of players also mentioned how this team needs to play with more FU, including the captain, JT Miller. Did anybody see any examples of either one of those things during this game? I can't really come up with anything. I thought they played with decent pace and decent jump to their game, but I think for, opening night of the season at home at Madison Square Garden, wanting to exercise the demons from last season, I think we all expected more from this team. And it's one thing to get shut out. I mean, that's bad in its own right, but didn't see enough edge, didn't see enough in your face kind of hockey, didn't see enough bleep you, didn't see enough no BS. And until you put those words into action, they're just words. We're going to be breaking it down in the next episode of Locked On New York Rangers. Do not miss it.
And thanks to John Schick for that report. We were both kind of nodding our heads as he was saying this, but I will turn it over to you as a Rangers fan. Your thoughts on this opening night defeat?
Well, ignoring Igor Shesterkin, who I thought played really well in this one, I think the obvious answer here is they're going to go as far as JT Miller is going to take them, and that's the whole no BS mantra. That comes from the captain, that emanates from JT Miller, and the issue here is, and I don't think anyone needs to worry about the sky falling after one game, but I think the issue here is you can see how important it is to get your timing, your edge, and your pace set during the preseason. JT Miller got hurt during the preseason, didn't play a lot. He admitted it tonight that he thought his legs were pretty heavy, and I think that was true of a couple of other guys as well, including Vincent Trocheck, who was the loser in the faceoff circle on the actual critical goal that made the difference in this one at the end of the first period, a just disaster final minute goal of the first period for Justin Brazeau. Artemi Panarin didn't play much in the preseason either, dealing with an injury. I didn't think he looked particularly sharp in this one. I know a lot of folks are going to get on Alexis Lafreniere for the mistake he made in the D zone on the Trocheck faceoff loss, and folks are going to get on Mika Zibanejad for not finishing. But realistically, those were the Rangers' two best players, not named Igor Shesterkin, in this game, and neither of them were able to finish. And that's a real big problem. If your best players aren't finishing, you're in deep trouble. So the Rangers, I think, have some stuff to work on. Mike Sullivan took it really seriously in his post-game press conference, but I don't think the sky is necessarily falling. I mean, I just going back to the Rangers, when Alain Vigneault took over, they had a disastrous start to the season under Alain Vigneault. And similarly, this was a big structural change. They had gone from the John Tortorella system. They had gone from playing lockdown defense, shot blocking, to Vigneault's overload system. And so there was some difference there culturally and systemically that led to that. And I think you're seeing some of that now as well. The Rangers just didn't look like they knew where they were supposed to be in a lot of those shifts as the night went on.
Yeah, Igor Shesterkin, just one goal allowed on 28 shots, certainly did his job. New Rangers captain JT Miller, no points, obviously, in this one. He was a -2, and Artemi Panarin was a -3. And I guess you could say, well, new coach, new team, maybe it takes some time to get systems together, things like that. And maybe that's true. But of course, on the other side, there was also a new coach with a new team. And you could say the same argument about that. So certainly not the way the Rangers were looking to start the season. But high hopes that eventually they can get it going, but not on opening night. And I think, as was said by John, a disappointing at home, particularly where you've got that extra juice, you've got that extra energy. You would think new coach, new season after a really disappointing season, to come out a bit flat like that is definitely disappointing.
Yeah, I think the only two players who didn't really come out looking flat were Zibanejad and Lafreniere, and I think that's encouraging because they both are coming off really, really rough seasons. But a lot of guys who also, Adam Edstrom hadn't played since I think January when he got hurt to end last season. Noah Labo's playing his first game of his career there as well. Connor Sheary's first game as a New York Ranger. So there was definitely a lot of moving parts for the Rangers in this one, and I think this is going to be kind of a moving target this year for them, trying to figure out what's going to wind up working. I think the big concern, if you look, and I didn't think based on the eye test he had the worst game in the world, but if you look at game score and you follow hockey stat cards on social media, Will Cooley had the worst game score of the night. Rangers aren't going to be going very far if their power forward, who is being hyped up on some podcasts as sort of a New York's Matthew Nyes, they're not going to be going very far if he's the worst player on the night in game score. They got to get more from Will Cooley.
Well, the Captains had the spotlight on him in Los Angeles. We will talk about that with our final game of the night here on Locked On NHL Game Night. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you'd like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sunday or your Monday or your Thursday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, well, we saved the best for last. At least it was the best matchup on paper, as you had two teams that both qualified for the playoffs a year ago, matching up in Los Angeles as the Kings were hosting the Colorado Avalanche. And while the Kings kicked off the final season for their captain, Andrei Kopitar, who announced before the season he'll be retiring after 20 years, the Avs welcomed their captain back on the ice, Gabriel Landeskog, playing his first regular season game since March 10th of 2022 due to the knee injury. Of course, he did come back for the playoffs last year for the Avs, but both the captains kind of getting the spotlight going into this one. Unfortunately for me as a Kings fan, the Avalanche skate off with a pretty convincing 4-1 victory. We get a report on this game from one of the hosts of Locked On Colorado Avalanche. His name is Chris Maselli.
The Colorado Avalanche get a solid opening night win over the Los Angeles Kings 4-1 in LA. And this was everything that the Avalanche could have wanted in an opening game, with getting the 2 points, but it was a little bit ugly, which maybe you would expect in game one, but it was the second period that really lifted the Avs to this win. They dominated the second. Things picked up for them about halfway through the first, carried over into the second, and then the third was just like a slog. I mean, a lot of penalties in this game, which you expect early in the season, but where you're really going to watch is, will kind of like the extracurriculars carry over the next time that these two teams play? You had Brant Clark kind of going at it with multiple Colorado Avalanche players. Is that just, okay, we're done with this? Or because it happened later in the game, does that carry over into the next game? So something to watch the next time that these two teams play, although there's no real history between them two. Maybe this starts something. Who knows? They're two playoff teams going at it. Could be something new in the making. I don't know. But overall, the way the Avalanche played in the second is how you want them to play for the duration of the year. First and third are okay. We can kind of fix things here and there, but that second period was really a thing of beauty. And you had Martin Necas, contract waiting, scores 2 goals in game number 1. So overall, exactly what the Avs wanted on the road. You get a solid win, and you're undefeated for now. So good game for the Avs.
All right, and thanks to Chris Maselli for that report. There we are. I guess I'll chime in on this first, since I am not only the Kings fan, but the host of Locked On LA Kings. And, I think the Kings are a good team, but I think the thing that has shown itself as far as what the Kings are lacking, and also presented itself in the form of what the Avalanche have, is that star talent. Nathan MacKinnon had 2 assists. Cale Makar had 2 assists, and they both had spectacular plays where they skated through the team to set up. One of them was Marty Necas with the goal. And, there was a play at the blue line where Makar, puts a move around a Kings forward who loses his jockstrap on the ice, goes to the net, gets a point-blank shot on. The save's made, but the rebound is put in. We've seen this as Kings fans in the playoffs with Draisaitl and McDavid. The Kings, again, they've got talent. They're a good team, but they just don't have those alpha great players that can make a play like that can turn a game around. And that's kind of what jumped out to me as a Kings fan. It's seeing those 2 stars, when they have to, be able to take over a play and make key plays and key moments that win hockey games for you. And the Kings, unfortunately, just don't have that. And we saw another example of it with MacKinnon and Makar in this one.
Yeah, I think what's one of the simplest way I can put it, Colorado's haymaker was better than Los Angeles's haymaker, and the fists did literally fly in the first period of this one, and yeah, it got a little chippy, but I mean quite literally, I think about that third Colorado goal, which is the one I think you were referencing, where Makar just the move he makes to get into the slot and create a high danger chance off a shot. Arturi Lehkonen buries the rebound. And this is one of the reasons why I have Colorado as my Stanley Cup pick for this year. I just think when all is said and done, that the Avalanche, they'll have room to make, a move at the deadline. But the bigger key is that right now, the team that they have assembled, their haymaker is on par with just about anybody else's haymaker in the league. When they are playing at their best, their pace, their physicality, it's hard to match. And then it's the drive as well, right? Like Nathan MacKinnon might be the most driven player in the league, and we know he learned from the best. So huge win for Colorado to get off on the right foot, and for them to I think exercise some, not all, of their demons from losing in the first round in that phenomenal 7-game series against Dallas last year. And for the Kings, I think they're looking for that haymaker. That's the and I think you hit the nail on the head, that they are looking for those stars so that they can be at their best as well.
And, Colorado, a little bit like Edmonton in that when you have 2 of the top 10 players in the NHL on your roster, then clearly there is that urgency to not waste that talent. Edmonton has been to the finals 2 years in a row. Colorado, of course, they won their cup not long ago, but 3 consecutive first-round exits since then. Now, as you mentioned, a little bit of a tough circumstance having to face Dallas in the first round. That was a difficult situation, but again, it's one game, but all we can react to is the one game we've seen, and it looked like a Colorado Avalanche team that is going to play with that sense of urgency, that understands that they are one of the better teams. They've got 2 star players, but the pressure is on them to go farther this year and not waste those prime years of these 2 amazing players.
I will say I thought the Kings' defensive structure was pretty good in the first period, and I think that's something that if they want to get back to the playoffs after the talent that they lost in the offseason, that's one of the things that they're going to have to rely on. This is a really well-coached team, and they were, by the regular season numbers last year, this was pretty much the best defensive team in the NHL last year during the regular season. Now, they lost their best defensive defenseman, but there were, I thought, signs tonight that they might be able to recreate Vladislav Gavrikov's absence. Obviously, that did not last as the game got deeper and Colorado, again, started throwing sort of their big punches and threw their weight around. But I think there were some positive signs for the Kings tonight. Obviously, the second period's not one of them.
And they're going to have to get right back on the horse because they're playing again coming up on Wednesday in Vegas. So 2 really tough games for the LA Kings to start the season. I did mention the 2 captains. Gabriel Landeskog did not have a point in this game. Andrei Kopitar did pick up an assist. And speaking of points, Nathan MacKinnon, by the way, became the all-time Colorado Avalanche leading scorer. Now, not franchise, because, of course, there was the time they were in Quebec. That's still Joe Sakic. But as far as wearing an Avalanche sweater, Nathan MacKinnon, now the all-time leading scorer with 1,016 points with his first period assist. By the way, the LA Kings, only 6 regulation losses at home last year, but they start off this year with a regulation home loss. And before we wrap it up, Alex, I got to ask you, and please give your honest effort, the Kings uniforms. What did you think? They unveiled their new 3rd jerseys on opening night, and in particular, they had the gray or silver helmets. They looked very much like what the Raiders would be if they had a hockey team. Thoughts? Thumbs up, thumbs down? What do you think?
Let me make sure I get this on camera. Yeah, that's a big thumbs up. Especially because here's why. The Kings already have one of the best jerseys in all of sports. I don't think that you can make it better. And certainly this effort, I don't think made it any better.
All right. I will admit I did kind of like it, but I think I'm in the minority on this one. Hey, if you want complete coverage of your favorite NHL team, there is a Locked On NHL Team podcast and YouTube show for you because we have a show for every NHL team. Again, our show, Locked On NHL Game Night's here for you each and every night, regular season and playoffs, wrapping up the night in the NHL. And don't forget, like and subscribe to the show if you're watching on YouTube. And we want to see your thoughts on tonight's action. You can even comment on the Kings uniforms and helmets if you'd like. You don't have to, though, if you don't think they're any good. But we want to know what you think about the games on every night as well. That is going to do it for our season debut episode of Locked On NHL Game Night. Alex, it was a pleasure working with you. Looking forward to you being a part of the crew this season. You'll be back coming up Wednesday night with Cam Stewart to continue things. But great to have you on board. Great job, and looking forward to this NHL season.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. But like I said, for the fans like us who had a rough night, marathon, not a sprint.
I certainly hope so. I'm Eddie Garcia. He is Alex Wiederspiel. Thank you for listening and watching Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day.